Hello and welcome to the Devoted Outdoorsman Podcast. Hey guys, before we start this week's podcast, I just wanted to stop and let you know that this week's podcast is being brought to you by Ethics Archery. If you want some great American arrow components that are quality built and they're just badass, I mean, shoot through propane tanks badass. I mean, basically, armor piercing badass. You guys need to check out Ethics Archery. Check out their website at ethicsarchery.com. What is up, podcast peeps? I hope you guys have been having a great week and you're ready for this week's podcast. This week on the podcast, we are going to talk a little bit about Pope&Young and Boone and Crockett and how to get an animal in the books. So I had my buddy George Moore on. We talked a little bit about the processes, things that you should pay attention to, and details that not everybody knows. I hope you guys are ready for an awesome podcast. Let's get this thing started.
Hello, Podcast Nation. We are here today with a great guest. His name is George Moore, and George has been on the podcast before some time ago. I would believe it was in February or March of this year. George is a official scorer for the Boone and Crockett and Pope&Young clubs. And with deer seasons opening around the United States at this time of the year, I've had several listeners contact me asking about how to get your deer entered into the books. So I figured talking to George Moore would be the perfect guest to have on the podcast. So, George, what have you been up to this September? Well, it's almost September, about to be September this weekend. What have you been up to in Oklahoma?
Well, Rob, it's been a continuation from last year's hunting season because a lot of guys got their deer scored way after the 60-day dry time. So I'm still scoring deer, not nearly as busy I was in January, February, and March, but I still score at least one or two a week. And then, like I said, people getting excited for the upcoming seasons that started in some of the states already, and we'll start here in Oklahoma October 1st. But I want to start first Rob, by saying that when a hunter thinks that he has a deer that possibly will make the record book, the first thing he needs to do in the field is take a good field photo of him and that deer and the type of weapon that he uses. That's real key to us when we do our due diligence on someone who has harvested a Boone and Crockett or a Pope&Young buck. We want to see that field picture. We want to see the weapon that they used, and we can determine then if it's one that's for the record book. And when I say that, Rob, let's go to Pope&Young first, since it's archery season now. The Pope&Young Club accepts only deer taken legally with a longbow, a recurve bow, a compound bow, and for no reason do they accept a crossbow. And the crossbows became real popular over the last 4 or 5 years, and now most states are letting people use the crossbow. And I know a lot of hunters that in the past they either had some type of handicap or that's the way they shot a crossbow. Now it's just a popular means of hunting, and so they're using the crossbow. The Pope&Young Club, established with their rules and ethics, have always been against the crossbow. And I'm going to be honest with you, Rob, I don't see in the future any time that the Pope&Young Club will accept an animal taken from Pope&Young Club with the crossbow. So like I say, you've got those three types of weapons that make it legal for Pope&Young entry. Another thing while we're talking about Pope&Young, the entry requirement is this, that we've got, when I score the deer officially for Pope&Young, it has to be dried for 60 days. Now, a lot of guys say, okay, I killed the buck on October the 1st, so 60 days later, I want to get him scored. Well, in some cases that might be correct, but in most cases it's not. And I'll tell you the reason why. When you shoot that deer, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to gut him, then you're going to field dress him, then you're going to take him to the processor, and then you've got the head in the freezer for a while, maybe before the taxidermist gets it. And then when the taxidermist gets it, or if you've got it, then you're going to skull plate it. You're going to cut those antlers off of it, or you're going to do a European mount. So when we talk about drying time, we're talking about the time that that skull with that antlers attached is in a dry form. In other words, it can't be in the freezer. It can't be with the skin on. It can't be with any meat or tissue attached. It has to be in dry form. So I tell guys that want their deer scored 60 days that the first thing they should do is get with their taxidermist, have him cape that animal, cape that cape for you, and then skull plate those antlers and clean them up and let them dry. Another thing that I get about people that are saying dry, there's this nomenclature about that spread gives you a lot of credit to the either the net or the gross or the score. And so they're not wanting that inside spread to shrink. I've heard stories, and even when we were in classes, we've seen results of where people have pried, either put a board, some type of metal or something between the antlers to keep them from shrinking. And I will tell you this, that in the event that a measurer or a qualified person or someone turns that person in, because what that does, that could possibly make the inside spread larger. So, it's not legal to do that for the requirements of Pope&Young. And so, like I said, when you get him, do a cape on him, do a skull mount or whatever, let him dry, put him in a dry area. And then after 60 days, we're going to score him for you. Part of the requirements for, archery, let's just put for Pope&Young, is that they have to have a valid hunting license. They have to have a tag attached to the animal, in the state that they took it. And then they have to sign a hunter affidavit and a hunter information sheet. And those questions that they ask you are, did you spotlight? Did you use motor vehicles? Anything that's non-ethical for the taking of a deer is not allowed for a Pope&Young entry. So when you shoot the buck, like I say, get you a good field picture, get him processed or get him caped out, get the antlers all dried, and kind of make you some notes that time. Make you some notes and say, I shot him at 7:15 in the morning at a distance of 22 yards. I was using a X-bolt compound bow. I'm using that name just because it's I don't want to give anybody credit, and then the type of arrow that you use, the type of broadhead that you use, the weight of the arrow, the weight of the broadhead. Those are all things that Pope&Young's going to ask you when you enter that into the book. Make sure you have your copy of your hunting license, you have a copy of your hunter check-in, or in some states, a regular game tag. And then you contact an official measurer in your area, and you tell him what you've done and keep the pictures, and then set an appointment up with him to get it measured. And Rob, you and I visited back in March or April. Last year was tremendously busy for me. I scored 237 deer total for Pope&Young. I scored over 300 deer for Boone and Crockett, and of that amount in the state of Oklahoma, I scored 37 bucks that grossed. That's gross score over 200 inches. So it was an exceptionally great, tremendous trophy year for the state of Oklahoma. So if anybody wants to enter into the book, just make sure you got all your I's dotted and your T's crossed and make it work. While we're talking about archery, I'll say this, that if someone does have a crossbow, and like I said, it's pretty popular today, don't think that you can't enter it in the book. Boone and Crockett accepts that crossbow entry into Boone and Crockett. The difference that I might say to you is that Pope&Young's minimum for a typical buck is 125 inches. Boone and Crockett's minimum for a typical buck is 170 inches. Now there is a what we call an awards banquet of Boone and Crockett, and that animal there could net 160 inches. And what that does, that puts them in the book for 3 years. After 3 years, then they're taken out of the book. So, but the all-time award is 170 inches for Boone and Crockett, and it's 125 inches for Pope&Young. I'm going to slide over to Boone and Crockett here for a little bit because we're talking about the crossbow, and that is that a lot of guys shoot these deer with a crossbow, and it's fun for them, and it's exciting, and it's legal, and it's ethical. It's just one thing that Pope&Young's not going to accept, but Boone and Crockett does. So if you shoot a buck with a crossbow, again, for Boone and Crockett, it's kind of the same category. You need to take a good field picture, with you and the animal, preferably in the field, not in the back of a pickup truck or hanging out of a tree, but in the field where you took the buck. And, you know, most everybody's got a smartphone today. And I think there's very few of us that carry a camera anymore because we've got a smartphone. So take those pictures, make your good notes. And if you think that deer that you shot with the crossbow would make Boone and Crockett, being the 160 net, on typical side, 185 on the non-typical side, then again, do all that same work. You're going to need your hunting license. You're going to need your hunting tag. You're going to need to sign an affidavit and a hunter's question sheet, just like we do on Pope&Young. You're going to have to provide information to your score that animal, that antler rack has dried again for 60 days before it can be officially scored. And so that's kind of the thing about crossbow. Now let's talk about Boone and Crockett. What does it accept? Because most people that I'd even talked to today, they said, well, Boone and Crockett's for rifle and Pope&Young's for archery. And that's true, except Boone and Crockett accepts any legally taken animal with any legal means of weapon. Therefore, it could be a shotgun slug. It could be a rifle. It could be a pistol. It could be a black powder muzzle loader. It could be a spear. It could be a crossbow, a compound bow, a recurve, any type of weapon that's legal in your state for that season, for that specific animal, is accepted into the Boone and Crockett book. Even they have a category for picked up. In other words, let's say that in some states, it's legal to pick up a dead animal, a carcass that's either a roadkill or been damaged or something like that, and you find that rack and you picked it up. You have a salvage tag from your Department of Wildlife, wherever you live. And if it's a big enough animal, a measure can measure that animal, and it's in a category called picked up. So all those antlers, what we're trying to do is we're trying to measure and record any type of animal that we get that we call as trophy in the trophy class. But that's just kind of a rough summary there, Rob, of what we do with Pope&Young versus what we do with Boone and Crockett. And like I say, I just touched on white-tailed deer, but I'm open for any other questions that you have for me regarding that.
So when it comes to like your equipment, I know a lot of people, it used to be, I know it's not this way anymore because of our previous discussion we had, but used to be like you couldn't use Luminox for the Pope&Young or like a lighted knock. Is there any other equipment that you could be using on your bow setup that could disqualify you?
The only other thing, and there's still a question about that, Rob, there is an electronic rangefinder that comes on your bow, and if it's electrically charged and gives you a distance, which gives you a little bit of an advantage over an animal that's attached to your bow, that's one of the very few that we've still got in the books. And I think that eventually that'll be waived out because you understand a knock's not gonna, it doesn't help you take that animal. What it does is it help you recover that animal. So what Pope&Young tries to do with their legal and ethical means of harvest is that anything that would help you get that animal without being a hunter or being a good shot or something is what they're trying to do away with. But no, the Knox are perfectly okay today, but the electronic rangefinder will not be. And most people carry a rangefinder in their pocket anyway, and that's legal, but not one that's attached to the bow. You can't have any type of a light, no type of flashlight, no lasers, anything that would help you in seeing an animal late in the evening, or even a laser that would pinpoint you exactly where that animal is with your target. So there's still some regulations there with Pope&Young that they're not going to allow you to be in the book if you use those type items.
So, like a peep or a light inside of your sight would be okay. So, like a light that's inside.
That's fine, because here, what that is, that's a sight pin. Most of them are some type of a true glow where the sun lights off of them, but you do have a light, and all that light doesn't do anything except light up those pins. It doesn't put an artificial light on the animal. It doesn't help you do that. In fact, I'm a bow hunter myself, and sometimes if it gets real late and you turn on your battery onto your pins and light them up, it's so bright on the pins you couldn't see your target anyway. So at that time, then it's probably too late to be shooting. But no, that's still legal. Lighted sight pins are still legal on archery for Pope&Young.
So once you have had your animal harvested and you've gone through the 60-day dry time and you've had it measured, how long does it normally take for your animal to show up in the book?
Well, last year was extremely a big delay. Not only did Oklahoma have a record harvest, there was a lot of other states had record harvest. So you go to thinking we're all volunteers. Even the people at the staff at Pope&Young office, a lot of those people are still just volunteers. So when you take your animal, it goes before the record committee, and that record committee checks for any numerical problems. In other words, if the measure added wrong or something, so they double check all that first. They double check everything that you've got. So if let's say it's 60 days and I score that deer for you and I get it mailed in today, I'm going to say that you need to be looking for at least 2 to 3 months for you to get anything back from Pope&Young. And sometimes it's even longer for Boone and Crockett, but at least don't be worried if it takes 2 or 3 months. In the event that there's a question that they have regarding the score, regarding a photograph, or regarding your license, they will contact you immediately and say, hey, we need additional information, or we need to see a better copy of this, or we want to let you know that we checked we checked your addition from your measure, and he had it at 125 and 1/8. We checked the measurement, and it's only 124 and 2/8, so therefore you don't make the book, and we're going to return your stuff to you. So, but usually, Rob, I would say about 8 weeks, 2 to 3 months, something like that.
So you said that there was 37 over 200 that you scored last year in Oklahoma.
Yes, that I scored. Now, there was a lot more than that, Rob, because I'm not the only official scorer in the state. There's a lot of game wardens that scored bigger bucks. There's a lot of other measures that scored bigger bucks. But I don't really know how many was scored, because here's what happens. Even of the 37 that I scored, we try, as a measure for Pope&Young and Boone and Crockett, we try very hard to get everybody to enter those deer into the book. But it's their privilege, their option to say yay or nay. So I still score them. I'm still going to score them, but the thing I ask them to do is put it in the book. But of those 37, I don't remember, Rob, offhand, but I'm going to say that I've only probably seen 30 of the 37 in the books, because either the guy didn't want it put in the book, or he didn't want someone to know exactly where he took the deer, or there might have been a question about the deer. But anyway, that there was a lot of big deer killed in Oklahoma. And like I said, I don't know the number over 200. I can just tell you what I scored, and you know this, and everybody else probably listening. I probably scored more than any other person in Oklahoma simply because I'm retired and I hustled those deer pretty hard. I traveled quite a bit on my own time. I traveled, from Guymon, Oklahoma to McAllister, from Miami, Oklahoma down to Altus. And, that's another thing that people need to understand. We're all volunteers. We don't get paid, and we don't charge. So I get a lot of questions I get from people, Robert. Well, how much does it cost for me to have you score my deer? It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't cost you one penny for me to score your deer. What costs you is when you are going to register that deer and you're going to send it in to put it recorded into the book. Then Pope&Young has a fee of $65. It's $25 to enter the club and $40 for the entry. Boone and Crockett has a fee of $40. And so, and we don't accept tips. We don't accept gratuities. We don't accept anything. And what that does, Rob, and I've been through 3 of the schools for Boone and Crockett at Pope&Young now, and you'll see why when I tell you this, that let's say that I score a deer that's 169 5/8. And the guys, and I tell him, I said, hey man, I'm sorry, but your buck was a really good buck. It missed all time by 3/8 of an inch. And, and he said, well, could you give me another 3/8 of an inch if I were to tip you bigger or something? And I just tell them this, Rob, it is what it is. When I put the tape on it, when I put the measure tape on it, when I add all the numbers up, it is what it is. That antler grew that animal and that deer grew those antlers, and I want to give him full credit for every inch of antler that he grew. So we don't take tips, gratuities, or anything like that for that simple reason, to make it all ethical and morally for us. The thing that I can ask for, and I'll be honest with you, Rob, I've never done it, and I've been scoring for 10 years. I've never accepted any money for travel time, but it is acceptable for Boone and Crockett and Pope&Young. If someone wanted me to score their deer and I had to drive 2 hours to score it, I could ask them for reimbursement for gas money and possibly a meal, but I don't do it, Rob, because that way I can always look someone in the eye and say I've never accepted one penny for anything I've ever done with Boone and Crockett or Pope&Young. And I do this as a volunteer, and I do this because this is my passion, and that's what I want to do.
And, it keeps you honest, keeps everybody honest. Like you said, the tape doesn't lie. When you put it on there and that's what it scores, that's what it scores.
It's kind of like on my card, even my business card, it's a quote that I took from when I had a Pope&Young school 3 years ago, that our director there was giving a speech, and that was kind of what he used, the term, it is what it is. And you're right. That tape doesn't lie. Those measurements are all the same. We know, all of us that have been qualified to measure, we know which antlers to score. We know which ones to measure. We know the legal requirements. We know the minimums. We know the position of where we put the tape. And, there's a few, I gotta say this, Rob, there's a few instances in a non-typical buck where there's some questions asked. And a lot of times that, even those people that I've scored for, they'll tell you that I picked up the phone and I've snapped a picture of something and I sent it to the office and, either at Pope&Young or Boone and Crockett. And I said, hey, I've got a question. Here's an antler sticking, that I think is coming off the top of the main beam, but it's just a little bit maybe crooked. What do you say? And so then we get 2 or 3 people to look at it and we go with that. Last year something happened, Rob. I'll bring this up. It wasn't on a Pope&Young deal, but it was a person who asked, and they not only asked me, they asked Boone and Crockett office. They asked, how come a measurer is able to score a deer and he doesn't have to have any witnesses? He doesn't have to have anybody attest his measurements, and he does it all by himself. And so whatever he writes down is it's in ink. It's what it is. And my answer to that question was that it's hard enough for someone to get an animal scored by an official measure to make time to meet him or to go there just for one person to be there. You can imagine what it would be like to try and round up 2 scores or 3 scores and have them measure that deer and remeasure that deer. So that's the reason that we do that. Now, there is an exception. The exception is if it's a state record that we have a panel score. In other words, I've been involved with a couple of panel scores. My first one I involved was in West Virginia. And I flew to West Virginia. I was on a panel for the state record whitetail there at the invite of another measure. In the state of Oklahoma, the Department of Wildlife will require on a typical record book buck, it's going to be panel scored by the measure and plus some of the department employees. The same on the non-typical, so it's the same. Boone and Crockett has a program to where if your buck that you shot was in the top 5 bucks of the year, your buck too will be panel scored. And any top 5 animals, whether it be a white-tailed deer, a grizzly bear, a walrus, a moose, if it's in the top 5 that was recorded that year, they will all be panel scored. It takes some time, it takes some money, and but that's what they require. But for the state of Oklahoma, we don't require that other than if it's a state record.
And do you know right off the top of your head what the state records are for the state of Oklahoma?
No, I do not. Rob, there's been so many numbers. I know that, I know this. I know that the state record non-typical buck, and I can't quote it exactly, is a little over 245, 247, 248, somewhere in that neighborhood. It was taken southwest Oklahoma some years back. But I do know that the new number 2 non-typical buck was taken this last year by Stephen Everett in Logan County on his farm there, and that buck I grossed it at a little over 255, and it nets a little over 245, but it is the number 2 non-typical, and the number 1 typical I'm pretty sure is still held in southeast Oklahoma. And again, Rob, I don't know the exact. Now, I think it's in the 190s, 191, 192, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Man, giant deer in Oklahoma. I hope that this year is another year of giant bucks. And so far, I've seen a lot of good velvet pictures, so we'll see what happens.
Rob, I wanted to say the same thing as you did. I had a guy ask me today. He said, "What do you think about the upcoming year?" And I said, "Well, let me tell you, if the game cam pictures that I'm seeing right now, if those deer get harvested, we're liable to have another record year. I mean, we've had tremendous weather, we've had good rains, we've had good forage crops, we've had good browse for these deer. The deer seem to be healthy, and I'm seeing some real large racks, both typical and non-typical in velvet. And speaking of that, people ask this too, and this doesn't have anything with measuring, but people ask me, they said, when do you think these bucks are shedding velvet? Well, I can tell you right now, velvet. I saw 3 bucks yesterday on my farm, and one of them had already shed. And so I would say that you're looking pretty, I always felt like it was about September 1st, but these bucks are fixing to shed this velvet off, and you're going to get to really see what they look like in hard horn.
Yeah, that's one thing that's on everybody's mind right now, especially mine, is what's going to happen after they shed velvet, because everyone that has spent a decent amount of time around whitetail know that when they shed velvet, it's a whole nother game. They kind of change up. Their whole attitude changes a little bit.
Their whole attitude changes. They break up from their bachelor groups. They start finding some type of territory. And if you've got one pattern that's coming to a feeder or coming to a feed source or coming on a trail, you've got him patterned right now, and he's still there, and you can get him in the daylight hours. October 1st is going to be key for you. If not, then you're right. Their patterns are going to completely break apart. They're going to change. They're going to go different directions. and just hopefully they stay on your piece of property that you've been hunting and that you have permission to hunt on.
Yeah, I like to refer to it as the trade because you don't necessarily know what's going to happen. You might trade up or you might trade down. So, it's always that interesting time of year to pull the trail camera cards.
You're exactly right. Yep, for sure, Rob.
And I saw that you had some pretty big bucks on trail camera on your property.
Rob, I've got a couple leases in north of Edmond. I've got some up by Guthrie. And again, a lot of it, I feed supplemental feed to my deer, starting in March. I fill the feeders up. I've got two, 600-pound boss buck feeders I fill with, protein feed, and I keep them going year round, starting in March. And now I'm going to go ahead and go year round. Last year I kind of cut it after January 15th and laid it off for about a month or so, but I'm going to keep doing it. It costs me some money, but I'm seeing results. I'm seeing bigger bucks. I'm seeing bigger, healthy does. I'm seeing big fawns. So I know it's got to be doing something good, and hopefully it keeps them on my piece of property, that I've got in two different areas, and we'll see.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people need to look into. If they are in a situation where they have a chunk of private property or whatever it may be that they can go ahead and feed supplemental, whether that just be corn, which, a lot of people feed corn and, that's not necessarily super beneficial for deer, but it does bring them in. What type of protein are you feeding?
Well, I tell you what, and only because I use Boss Buck feeders because I'm a Boss Buck dealer, but the other thing is I use Ultimate Antler is my protein feed. But I tell you, I use other types of protein. I like Big J, B&J, supplemental feed. I feed corn all year round. I don't feed, I'll have to admit, during the heat of the summer, my corn ratio is probably 25% corn, 75% protein. But I always have mineral blocks and everything else. But I've had great success with Ultimate Antler, and but I think all these protein feeds are about the same. I mean, if you can get something with 12 to 16% protein, you don't want any higher than 16% protein for these deer. I mean, they're not going to utilize it. It's going to go to waste because they're going to take just enough of it to what they've got. It's going to be too rich for them if they get 18 or 19 or 20% protein. So, stay in that area of 12 to 16% protein and just keep them filled. And, like I say, your corn is about 8.5% protein. So it's still a little bit of help for them. And, if you search around and you kind of look, you can get so much protein feed, just a little bit higher than what you can get a bag of corn for. So if it means that much more, it's worth spending a few dollars more for a bag, if you want to do it that way.
So with the season opening up soon here in Oklahoma, and I know elk seasons are opening up across the country, do you have any big hunts that you're planning this year?
Yeah, Rob, I leave, as a matter of fact, I hunt New Mexico every year. I'm leaving for New Mexico elk hunt. I leave, with my son and a group of us from Edmond. Got two groups going. One of us is leaving on the 24th of September. And then I'll be leaving the 27th of September for an archery elk hunt. And then I've got one other, trophy hunt. I'll be in Nebraska this year for a trophy mule deer. And then I'm going to stay home and try and stick an arrow in one of these bucks that you've seen of my game cam pictures right around home. That way I can stay close to the house and do all my honeydews for the wife.
Hey man, that's a key point or key part of a good hunting season right there is doing all the honeydews and keeping her happy.
Rob, I've been married 45 years, and I can assure you this, that she'll always remember when deer season is, but she'll also remember when I need to clean the windows or clean the barn or take out the trash. So I'm going to do my part because I'm always going to be out there in a tree stand somewhere on October 1st.
Exactly, man, exactly. And I think I talked to one of my buddies about this the other day. I know with deer season getting real close to opening, everyone's excited about, that new piece of equipment or whatever it may be. But, it might be a good idea to save like 50 or 60 of those bucks and buy your wife some flowers and some chocolates or something. Just, those extra brownie points might pay off.
I think those extra brownie points are well worth it. Yeah, if your wife really knew how much a guy spends on hunting every year, I think a $50 deal or a $100 deal would be pretty cheap investment for you to continue to hunt, and then she won't know that you bought a $1,500 bow or a $5,000 rifle. So yeah, you need to take care of your bride.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, George, exactly. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your evening. I know you're busy this time of year, and I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, man.
You bet, Rob. And like I said, I enjoy visiting with you every time we get together. Call me again if you have questions, you have any other topics that somebody wants to hear about. I'm willing to talk, and as you can tell, I'm a talker, so I'll continue to tell them stories, and hopefully I got them in the right direction and they can go kill a Boone and Crockett or a Pope&Young buck.
Yeah, man, I'm hoping that I give you a call this year. Maybe I'll harvest something worth measuring.
I hope you do too, Rob. Just remember, let's wait 60 days after drying time before you give me a shout.
Sounds good. Well, you have a good season, George, and have a great elk hunt.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it. Enjoyed everything, and like I said, I'll talk to you guys later.
So what did you guys think of this week's podcast? Every time I talk to George, I end the conversation feeling like, man, I thought I knew something about deer, but George knows so much, it's ridiculous. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this week's podcast, and I hope you guys tune in next week, next Saturday, for the new episode of the Devoted Outdoorsman Podcast. But before we end, please, if you'll take a second to go and rate us on iTunes, and maybe even go check us out on Facebook. Give us a like. Check us out on Facebook or YouTube at The Devoted Outdoorsman. And hey, if you're feeling like you want to get a little coffee, you can always check out The Devoted Outdoorsman Daybreak Coffee at thedevotedoutdoorsman.com. So I hope you guys have a great week. And if you're hunting in your state right now, good luck. But remember, stay safe, watch for snakes, and be careful out there. I'll see you guys next week for the new episode of the Devoted Outdoorsman Podcast.